Hey everyone. As you know, content in my book is king when it comes to digital marketing. However, it takes a while to come up with a good content marketing plan that actually works. So I want to give you some shortcuts. I want to give you some tips on how to make sure that you are in cohesiveness with your visitor before they even pick up the phone and call you. And there's no better person that I know that can show you how to do that than my good friend Barbara Gavidnik, who was a repeat guest on this show. So without further ado, enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to Marketing Solutions for Local Businesses, the podcast where you will discover all the latest and greatest digital marketing tools, tips, and strategies you will need to implement in order to stay ahead of your competition. If you are not getting the results you are looking for from your digital marketing efforts, this is the podcast for you. And now, here's the host of our show, the local business guy himself, Frank Deming.
Hello, everyone. This is Frank Deming, the local business guy, and welcome to another episode of Marketing Solutions for Local Businesses. Happy Wednesday. Happy Hump Day, everyone. I hope you guys are having a rockin' week thus far. Today, I have the privilege of having a repeat guest, and she's happened to be the first guest of the new year. As I said in the pre-intro, she's someone who I admire a lot because she actually made me change something that I really believed in prior to meeting her. And she actually made me change. So if anyone can make me change, not that I'm not stubborn, but anyone can make me change, I have utmost respect for her. And I'm talking about the great, the one and only Barbara Gavidnik. How's it going, Barbara? And welcome to the show once again.
Hey, Frank, thank you. Thank you for that really wonderful intro. I really want you to just kind of like walk ahead of me every place I go and introduce me that way.
Hey, let's do
awesome.
it. Let's plan it. Hey, New Year's. It's a new year. So maybe that's something we can plan, you know?
Yeah. I want you to walk in like, little trumpets blazing.
Awesome. So today, Barbara, because I consider you the content queen, and like I said, you've changed my mind a lot about how content is delivered. Today, I want to talk to you about how our story sells our work. And no one is better equipped to talk about that than you, because you actually made me a believer in that. So let's dive into that. But before we do that, how are your holidays? What's going on in Barbara Gavidnik's world? Let's catch us up on what, wow, outstanding things you did for your clients last year. And, let's catch up on that. And then we get into the good stuff. Is that good?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks. It was another great year. A lot of my clients tend to be a little bit less skeptical than you are. They tend to be in that space of, I have this business. A lot of them are small businesses, solo businesses, and they know what they know, and they know what they're good at, and they know that they're really good at that. Where they stumble and where they kind of flail a little bit is that idea of convincing other people of that, and even telling other people of that, because they're so in their own heads, they're so in their own space of, I know how to do what I do, and I know the results that it gets, that it's really hard for them to put themselves in the shoes of the person who might be wanting them or wanting to hire them. And so I just spent a lot of time with folks in that space, right? People who kind of felt like they were talking about their business, knew what their business was, but really were having a hard time getting, just getting the right clients in, or getting like really bad leads. That's always one of the things that I see. People is like, okay, maybe your messaging needs a little work, right? If you're getting, people are saying, oh, I'm going to recommend you to this person for this. and it's not what you do,
Mm.
that's the disconnect, right? So I had a number of folks like that. And then a couple of others just sort of, there was a lot more communication strategy work I did this year
Mm-hmm.
around, people purchasing a small company. So I had a very small travel agency business purchasing another very small travel agency business. And how do you message that right to all of your
Mm-hmm.
audiences?
Right.
So it was a good and interesting year, and
Awesome.
looking forward to another good and interesting year. Got lots of new ideas bubbling up, but mostly around, well, always around, helping people just be really better writers for their business and really
Awesome.
putting
Awesome.
that content out there that they need.
Awesome. Now, I failed to say this before. So you're basically a writing coach, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Writing coach, message strategy. So comes from a long line of my corporate work. Before I started 423,
Mm-hmm.
I was, I was a speechwriter for CEOs and did a lot of content planning. And what I do now is sort of right size that and work with far more interesting people than my corporate, days.
I hear you. I hear you. All right. So I'm going to start off my questions here by maybe even putting you on the spot, just because that's what I do. Uh,
That's what we're here
uh,
for.
I know my take on content, and you have convinced me a little bit, but a little bit of the old me is still there. I'm just being honest here, but my take on content is a little bit different than yours. So I would love to know what's your take on the whole phrase "content is king."
Sure. Well, I tend to use content as queen, but that's just me.
Oh, oops.
That's okay. It's king for you. It is queen for me. When I think about that, and we see that phrase a lot, and you use it, and I use it. What I mean by it is that really, content is really the beating heart of your business. Um, and that sounds like something that somebody who's a content coach would say, right? Like, of course, I
Mm-hmm.
want you to think it's the most important thing. But here's the deal, it's like when you have good content, it's going to do a lot of work for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to be working for you, or it should always be working for you, right? Like if your messaging on your website is so clear and so inviting that people get onto that page and they go, oh, he gets me. He knows exactly what I'm struggling with. He's the person for me because that's what's kicking me in the butt right now, and I need some help with that. Somebody comes in and sees themselves on that page, then that page is doing the work for you. You're not anywhere
Mm-hmm.
around. Maybe you're off in Cancun or something.
Right.
But there's still that message is still there. It's doing the work for you when you're not in spaces where you can be one on one or talking with people. So that's what I think of it when I think of the beating heart of your business. The couple of things that you say all the time that just make
Mm-hmm.
people understand what you do.
But there's a particular way of writing that so that it does the work for you, correct?
I think so, yes. I think that people tend to, either want to emulate other people, they see some good content. But to me, it's just really being in your actual authentic voice and
Mm-hmm.
telling that story again from somebody else's point of view, because it's your story, but it's really what your story is going to mean to someone else.
Right. So along those same lines, as you know, I'm a huge advocate of coaching, and I was coaching with a guy one time. I'm not going to say his name because he's a very popular business coach. And he told me that for me to be successful in this business, I have to be a little bit more bold. I have to be, he tried to turn me basically into him because he was very bold and voracious and stuff like that. And that's just not my character. What do you say to something like that? If someone were to say, hey, you got to be someone you're not. Just
I'd
curious.
say, nah, I don't think that's true.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I don't do corporate communications anymore, because when I was in that space, I was being someone I was not. And I was
Right.
good at it and I could do it, but man, I didn't like it.
Mhm.
Um, I think that, being your authentic self is going to be always the best thing, right? Like I always think about, like, you scroll through Instagram and there's like 100 people in there who look exactly alike, right? Like they've got the same look and feel, they've got kind of the same stuff. And, for some of those people, it's going to be authentic. And then for other people, it's going to be like, this is how you succeed at this. So you have to look this certain way, you have to post this kind of certain material. And I just don't, I don't know that that differentiates anyone.
Right.
It may not appeal if you don't want to be really bold and out there and brash about things. If that's not you, it's just not, it's going to come off as fake. And when somebody meets you and you don't actually match up to that sort of persona that you created,
Mhm.
they're going to be like, well, what else is kind of fake about this? you know? And I think people, we're all used to being online and, kind of seeing what people put out there. And yeah, you can tell when, either I can tell pretty easily, like when people aren't necessarily being themselves, because they might be all over the place, right? You
Yeah.
might see one kind of content here, one kind of content there, and one day they just couldn't, get themselves going to be bold that day, so they kind of showed up as themselves. And the other way that you see that happen, I think, is the opposite way, is that when people aren't really sure, they're a little unsure, or they're not quite confident enough to put their voice out there, then they start to sound really generic.
Right.
And again, like nobody wants, very few people want to buy generic, right? Especially if there's
No.
somebody who's working in your business, and working with you. You want somebody who's going to really be, be them and really help you, and not just be like, here's what I'm pulling off the shelf for you today, and here's what I'm going to pull off the shelf for you tomorrow, kind of thing.
Hmm. Yep. Yep. Well said. Well said. Now, so the topic of this is we're talking about stories and
Mm-hmm.
how it's used. So I'm a huge advocate of Donald Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he has this book and everything, and I'm sure you know of it.
I do.
And the name of it escapes me right now, but I'll make
He's
sure
got
I
a
look
couple
it
of
up.
books,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But the one that I'm talking about, I'll make sure I put a link to the show notes on it, so
Yeah.
everyone can pick it up. It's on Amazon. It's a great book. I have it. It's awesome. Anywho, but I wanted to talk to you about this because you were a huge advocate of that practice as well. So I want to know, I want to dig a little deeper and find out a little bit, how does our story sell our work, like in a particular for our businesses?
Yeah, because I think that in the book we're thinking of, the name just, it's Build Your Story Brand.
Ah,
That's the one.
got it.
Yeah, exactly. And
Thank
and
you.
that's Don Miller stuff, and he's got some great stories about that. And I do think the way I say our story sells our work is, it's a couple of reasons I say it that way.
Hmm.
Number one, a lot of people get intimidated by creating content or writing for their business, writing in general, right?
Yeah,
You were
yeah,
not a big
yeah,
fan of
yeah. You think?
it.
You think?
And so for me, it helps position the work that needs to get done for your business in a way that maybe is a little bit more appetizing and a little bit more, I can lean into that. You just need to tell me the story of what you're doing. You just need to tell me the story of why what you do work is going to work for me. You just have to tell me the story of somebody who did work with you and got great results. Um, our story sells our work on a number of levels. It's a personal story because I want to know, for instance, like my travel agent client, for instance, it's like,
Hmm.
how does somebody build this luxury travel agency out of nothing? Well, because she grew up in the outback of Australia and, not in the outback, but in a very small town in Australia,
Oh
and
wow.
just had these, crazy dreams of seeing the world, and got a job with Tourism Australia, and then suddenly said, I'm bringing the world to Australia, and I'm bringing them to my Australia.
Wow.
And so, people have interesting stories about what get them to where they are. I always tell the story about how I switched my business from being very corporate communications focused to working with small businesses. And it was my last corporate client, and I was sitting in a conference room, and it was 7 a.m. and I'm sitting at a room with 18 guys all wearing the same blue shirt. And, they're going around talking about, I don't even remember what the topic was, what was happening within the company at that point, but I was doing internal communications. So I was doing, here's how we're going to explain this to employees. And so, going around, they're like, well, maybe we should say this, maybe we should say this. Barbara, what do you think? And I knew in that moment, the first thing that came in my head was, I don't care. I'm going to tell you guys something. It's like, I'm going to tell you guys something. Great. I'm going to create a whole messaging platform for you. I'm going to create a whole strategy to roll this out. I'm going to think of all the FAQs. I'm going to give you the whole package. And you guys are going to throw it over your shoulder and go, I'll just do it. I'll just wing it. Because that's how, corporations are. Because people in charge always know better. So in that moment, I'm like, okay, well, this is a sign, right? If I am sitting here, taking these people's money, I should care. Because it was very clear that I didn't. It was the time to say, oh, wait, I can actually take these skills and help people who are really, who don't know what they don't know and who are struggling and, just kind of spinning their wheels. And if I scale this stuff down, I'll be able to help them, and I will care. So, it's that sort of stuff. It's both the testimonials that you get that people are going to be like, oh, great. Because we all love story, right? Like I can tell you, like we can tell people what happened in plots of movies, right? Because there's a whole structure to it. And we remember it. And it's much more interesting than just saying, okay, here's some data points about, website SEO, because there's lots of data points about that, right? That your clients and the people who want to come work with you, don't want you to say, here's the 500 data points, because they could find that out themselves. They were like, great, how do I make this work for me? And does it work for me? And then you tell the story of, all your client successes.
Right. And you really believe, Barbara, that helps with conversions in terms of people visiting your site, and you think because they're resonating with your story? Is that what you think it is?
Yeah, I do think so. I think that it's going to do one of two things, right? It's either going to have people, if you've got your content sort of right and you're telling the right story, it's going to do one of two things for you. It's going to say, people are going to say, ooh, not for me. I do not like her approach. She's crazy, whatever. Step away. And that's fine, right? Like we don't need people to kind of be mushy, right? We either need them to be, yes, this sounds great, or no. Because if they're a no, that's great. They move on. They find the right person for them. But if they're a yes and they're intrigued, I do think that it does help. It does help, especially if you have a business that might be a little hard for people to understand, right? They're going to understand it better in a story. They're going to understand it better when you say, here's how it started out. This is what we did. And here's how the end result. Isn't that a great end result? Don't you want that? I do think that it does. It may not be the thing that says, great, I'm going to sign on the dotted line, but it is going to keep people interested, right? Like if they're like, oh, when you think about some people who you've met maybe, or even like coaches I've worked with, I went to their website. Oh, okay. I like what they're saying. I like how they're saying it. I'm going to hang out with this person for a while.
Right. Yeah, that's how it works. Yep. What's interesting about what you just said, though, dialing back in, like with me, like you have the position to throw away who you don't, for lack of a better term anyway, throw away who you don't want to work with. Because like with me, as long as I'm at 50 clients, I'm good. And I can pick and choose, because attrition is going to happen, whatever, people sell the business or whatever, whatever happens. And as long as that attrition rate for me is like at 5%, all I have to do is market enough each year to get 5% to replace the attrition. And I'm happy. So I'm going to, dive in a little bit more with the storytelling, because I don't do a lot of it, unfortunately. But this is actually going to lead me to my next question. So speaking of what you was talking about, the storytelling, like, can you tell us, what should we, what should our content efforts focus on in 2022 now that we're here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the thing I wrote about this at the end of last year. The overarching question that I'm asking all of my clients to think about, and I'm thinking about for myself, is just asking myself why. Like, why am I doing certain content? I've got sort of an outreach engine that I've been using for the last couple of years. I'm really looking at it and saying, why? Why am I doing this? Because there's a lot of folks who, get that info and they're like, well, I should be on social media. I should be on this particular social media, so I'm going to do it. And, stuff changes. And there are businesses that make 100% sense to be on social media and to be really active on Instagram. And then there are others where it's like, maybe not so much. And so I really feel like stepping back and saying, why am I in the places that I'm doing? Like, why am I blogging the right way? Am I doing this? Is my podcast the right thing? Just really kind of coming back to, is it supporting me? Is it helping me tell my story? Is it, being of service to my community? Am I, and is it, helping me maybe, sell a few things and stuff like that? Because, we're here to be in business, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that is sort of a big piece of where I want people to think about, because I think we have, especially in the last 2 years, we lived through 2 pandemic years, where we're just like, I don't know what's going on, and trying new things and stuff. But I think having a really good, clear why is very important. So I think that's one of the things. And I think too, we've talked about this even, at the top of this podcast, just like, is this authentic to me? Is it something that that both the message and the medium, is this an authentic representation of what I do and how I help people out? And those are like the big questions I always ask people. Like, if I'm doing content planning sessions or, the workshops on that, it's like, really, we're going to start with, why are you doing the things you do? And I always ask people to look at, where are you posting on your, for your business? How are you using social? How are you using your list? Does that still make sense? Because sometimes we just kind of get in a rut.
Oh yeah. One of the things, I'm going to give you a little shout out here, Miss Gavidnik. One of the things that I really loved about working with you was how you always centered me when I was writing the things that you wanted me to write. You would say, how would blank client, because I would told you who my ideal client, how would blank client receive that? And that always put me back. So that was a way of centering me all day. Because I was very, very stressed and I was working on other things, I didn't like those questions, but it made me think, how does this person, focus on these things? So I want to thank you for that. And that was one of your strategies that I was like, oh, this is different. And it made it fun, to be honest with you.
It doesn't have to be daunting. I think, we carry a lot of baggage about writing and creating content that comes way back from our days in school, right? Like, I had a 4th grade teacher, man. She used to stand over my shoulder and correct stuff as I was writing it. And I liked to write, but, the ghost of her still shows up sometimes. And just, it's like, oh no, who's going to, what is she going to think about this? She's probably dearly departed by now and probably not really thinking about me. But those things carry on, right? Like, so you have to, it's like, if you can find a way to make it fun, that's a good way of doing it. And again, you're doing it for yourself, but you're also writing for that other person who you want to engage with.
And it's funny, you mentioned that, because a lot of times when I was writing, I was thinking, what's Barbara going to think about this? And it's totally not like that. It has nothing to do with it. So then I would just say, wait a minute, it's all about me. Is it right for me? Is it my voice and this and that? So anyway, I digress a little bit. So
it is.
It's
It is
funny.
part of the process, and and I think that it can be, it can be tough for people to just be like, oh my gosh. I know that, like, when I switched over from doing corporate stuff to more personal and small business stuff, I was writing much more in my voice. I didn't have to come up with that sort of generic corporate thing. And then while I was making that transition in my content, I had a lot of my old corporate clients in my head, right? Like going, I don't know, that's not going to fly. That's not formal enough.
Yeah.
And I finally had to remind them that they
Yeah.
were not in the picture anymore and they were free to go.
Yeah, those transitions of when you transition from corporate to solo entrepreneurs, well, I guess it's longer for some people than others. It was very long for me, so I can
Yeah.
understand that. Um, as you know, Barbara, I serve a lot of attorneys. That's my, I would say that's the bulk of my clients. How can an attorney use this, like this whole storytelling thing? How can they use it to improve their conversion rates? I mean, do you
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
about something like that?
I mean, I think that, and there's a couple of different ways to think about story, right? Like there's sort of the case study, that can be a story. There's testimonials, that can be a story. But I think there's also that idea of, particularly with, with attorneys, right? Like, again, they tend to present just a very, authoritative, this is what I know, this is what I do
Yeah.
kind of thing, which is good. Like, you want an authoritative lawyer. I don't want a lawyer who doesn't know what he's talking about.
Right.
But on the other hand, like, is there room within that
Mm-hmm.
to tell the story of why they became a lawyer? Like, what is driving them? What is the reason that they actually do what they do? What's the juice that they get from doing this particular thing and not another type of law, right? Like, that's kind of one of the things you can think about. Like, your lawyers, I'm assuming, are not, corporate lawyers, right? So why
No.
are they doing what they're doing versus, being in some corporation, kind of doing that kind of law? There's got to be that. Is there an emotional connection to what they're doing? Is there, a piece in their background that has led them that way? Are there
Mm.
particular clients that they won't ever forget about because of the outcome or because of how the way things went?
Mm-hmm.
It's taking that thing that you do and making it less automatic,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
not like, okay, I'm great, I'm going to churn through content because that's what I know how to do.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more why, there's a lot more heart underneath that.
So you feel like that attorney will be able, if they do this, they'll be able to connect more with the potential clients than the other attorneys who are not doing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, and again, it depends on who they're trying to attract, right? Like, and what the work is. But I would
Yeah.
feel like, family law, for instance, yeah, there's a lot of emotion and a lot of
Yeah.
individuality and that sort of thing. If you're doing, I don't know what other kind, it
Personal
may or may
injury.
not personal
Yeah.
injury. Again, there's a lot of background in those
Yeah.
kinds of
Yeah.
things.
I have a lot of work with some bankruptcy attorneys as well, and I think that's a lot of room for, like, hey, why did you get into bankruptcy law? Like,
Yeah,
did you fall into some hardship or whatever? I don't know. So I don't know. I
right.
just wanted to ask you that because I
Yeah,
deal with
yeah.
a lot of attorneys, and a lot of attorneys listen to the show. So
Excellent.
reach out to Barbara if you need a story. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled
Yeah.
program.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe it's some myth busting, right? You bring up, like, bankruptcy and personal bankruptcy and stuff. It's like there's a lot of stuff around that, right? Like, people have a lot of emotions or suppositions about what that actually means. And, maybe it doesn't mean that. Maybe it's actually, some reframing that can happen.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, yeah, you never know.
Mhm.
Um, but all right, so let's dive a little deeper onto something that I think was my biggest problem. Um, in when I started with the whole content as king or queen in your case, subject. Um, uh, and I never, I should have asked you this last time actually, but I stumbled upon something that helped me, but I'm curious, and I'll tell you that what that is later. I'm curious to see your answer to this because one of the things I struggled with was continually feeding that beast that we call content, continually having content available to us. How do you combat that? What's your secret sauce?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that I get a lot, right? Because people will be really interested. They're like, "Yeah, great, yay! I can write a blog or send out my email," and then they're like, "Oh, I got to do it again."
Right.
Oh, I got to do it again.
You kind of run out of
Um,
words sometimes, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't, but and so I think there's a couple of ways to approach that idea of how do you continually feed a content beast, right? First of all, going back to our why question of earlier, let's look at what continually really means, right? Like, are you cranking out stuff? Has somebody told you at one point that you should be sending, 17 emails a month or something like that? So number one, let's look at what continually really is. So when I help people do their content plan, that's what we look at, right? We're like, okay, what is really going to work for me and from a terms of creating content? Because, I don't think many of your clients, I don't know if any of your listeners are, but, they're not professional full-time writers. This is not our gig, right? This is like supporting our gig, but it's not the thing that we
Right.
do. So there's a couple of things I think about it. One is like I try to look at the very big picture, at least like a quarter at a time, right?
Mhm.
And let's look at what is happening in the business. What do I know I'm going to be putting out there, right? So I do a co-working sessions on Fridays. And so there's a couple of times a month that I'm going to promote that because I just am, right? It's like, this is something I'm offering. And so I have to look at like what's happening when, and when can I write about that, right? Like, so if I have to do a blog every other week, which is what my current schedule is, can I be plugging into those things so that I know that, oh, okay, the blog 2 weeks ahead of the content workshop or the co-working session, that can be a topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, so if you have it kind of planned out that way, that's one way to kind of ease it out because then you start to see topics that you can be writing about, right? Like,
Right.
this is what's happening in the business. This is how I'm going to support it through content. The other thing, and I know I've said this to you many times, and I've given you ways to not do this, but it's like never start with a blank page. You never want to just sit down, open up a Google Doc, and be like, darn, what am I going to write about now? Right? Like, you want to have that reason, you want to have that why piece already set
Mm-hmm.
up for you. So if you have a plan, perfect. You can just kind of pick and choose from that. But the other thing is like, what is the why here? What am I trying to say? What do I need to say? What do people need to know? And that can apply whether it's something that you're putting on your website or wherever. It's just the kind of stopping, going, what am I trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I saying it to? Why do they care? Why do I care? Why do they care? Like, you heard me say those questions to you a lot because that's
Many,
always the process, right?
many times.
So
Yes.
yeah, so that's another way to kind of stay with it. And I think another thing too that people get caught up with is they don't necessarily give themselves a long enough runway if they are promoting something. So I just saw a note from somebody saying, "Hey, I've got this workshop in 2 weeks, and so I'm going to start sending out emails about it." And it's like, yeah, maybe 2 weeks is not quite enough,
Mm.
especially, at the beginning of the year when people are sort of inundated by everything that's going on, right?
Yeah.
So that's a way to kind of let yourself kind of um, feed some things over time. And then there's like really two very tactical tips about feeding the content beast. One is you can always repurpose stuff.
Mm.
People don't always read every single word that you write. People come into your world. They might get on your email list. They haven't seen the stuff you did 12 months ago. So it's
Yeah.
really good to kind of think, can I cycle through some of these things? I'll admit I repost blog posts a lot. I might put a new intro into it. I may change it up a bit. I may just say, hey, I ran out of time to do a blog post, so I'm rerunning this one from January of 2019 or something. But if you have some core content that you're working with, you can repurpose it in a lot of ways. If you've got really great content that you sent out in a letter, in a proposal, and you really liked part of it, take part of it and make it part of your website, or put part of it in in a blog post or something. And then that's the other trick too, is like I have a lot of folks who, once they do quit writing, sometimes are like, oh my gosh, writing a blog post, for instance, just takes so long because I'm researching and I'm writing, and they're writing like 1,000-word blog posts. To which I say, that's too long, and break it up. Now they have 3 blog posts, right? So now they're kind of feeding it that way.
That's funny. So as an SEO guy, I would say 1,000-word blog post is awesome.
Okay.
That's what you would want. You want 1,000-word blog post, of course, tagged all over with your keywords, strategically, of course. And that's what the Google gods love. But that's just my world. That's my perspective.
That's a good point. I look at it from the perspective of other readers, not the Google readers. But it's like I think about how often do I have time to read 1,000-word blog post? But it's a good point counterpoint, because if they can't find it to read it or not read it, then what's the point, right?
Yeah. So one of my strategies for repurposing content is if I wrote a kick butt blog post that gets a lot of traffic and a lot of conversions, what I then do is I repurpose that into a podcast episode. Then I repurpose that into a video, and I repurpose it into a maybe a newsletter or social media post. So I get different modalities, so people will consume the same content in a different way. So that's usually my strategy. But in terms of getting content or feeding the content beast, if you will, my strategy is our good friend Google Trends. That's why I get it.
Okay. So you use Google Trends for your topics?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Just for my topics.
Yeah.
And we also do that for my clients as well. Because I've got a bunch of writers on my team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. And I do the same thing, like, especially if I send out a newsletter and I get a lot of replies back, then that newsletter is going to pop up on my LinkedIn not very long after that and become an article over there.
Yes. Yep. Awesome.
Yeah.
So Barbara, do you have anything that you want to share with our listeners before I let you go?
I do. Thanks. Yeah. One of the things that we talked about a lot was, today was planning and like having a structure for when you're going to send stuff out. I actually have reconstituted and resurrected a workshop I used to do frequently. It's a content planning workshop. And so basically we get together. It's very hands-on. We talk about where are you going to be out there in content? What are you doing direct to your people? What are you doing via social? And we help map out everything that you want to do, come up with some themes, some topics. And so that you have pretty much a 3-month plan of how you want to reach out, why you're reaching out, and in what ways you're going to do it. So that's coming up on January 26th.
Awesome. And you're going to provide the link so I can drop in the show notes for me?
Absolutely. Going to provide a link. And, if any listeners want to get a little discount on it, I will offer a discount code of Friends of Frank, and I will give you that info as well.
There you go, guys. Special from the great Barbara Gavitnet herself. She's giving you a discount because of you're an avid listener of this show. But yeah, this has all been great. I mean, is there anything that I did not ask you that you think would benefit the audience?
Oh, I love that question. You learned that question from me, I think. Because I always ask that question. No, I think that, I would love for people to just kind of relax into their story, right? Relax into their voice, relax into their story. You get to be you in your business, unless you're, I don't know, in personal assistant or something, and you have to present you're somebody else, right? But you get to be you, and your story is one that people are going to connect with, and so I feel like as much as you can be authentic in that, that it will do your business well, because you'll be presenting who you are, and your people will then be able to find you.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I've gotten a lot of different types of people reaching out, for sure, ever since I've changed the content on my website. So thank you for that. Thank you for being on top of me, so to speak, and saying, "Hey, did you get that done yet?" That's awesome. That's I need stuff like that. Not other people don't, but I do. So
yeah. I mean, I think it's also the topic, right? Like, you were stepping into something that you weren't 100% sure you wanted to do. So you maybe need a little nudge, a little support.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did, and I'm glad I actually took the plunge. But that was awesome, and this was awesome as well. I want you guys to take advantage of what Barbara is offering. She is a tremendously talented woman when it comes to content, when it comes to building your story. Take her up on the offer, and I want you guys to flourish in 2022. That is the whole goal of this year. This is season 3 of this podcast, and in season 3, I want all of my listeners to flourish. And there's no better way to flourish than to get your messaging right. And there's no other person better to do that than Barbara Gavitt herself. So without further ado, I'm going to bid farewell to this episode. Until next week, folks, this has been Frank Deming, the local business guy, and you've just been blessed by the great Barbara Gavitt. Take care, and bye for now. Peace out.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Marketing Solutions for Local Businesses, the podcast where you will discover all the latest and greatest digital marketing tools, tips, and strategies you will need to implement in order to stay ahead of your competition. Don't forget, any links that were mentioned during the broadcast will be available to you in the show notes, so be sure to grab them while you have the chance. Incidentally, if you have any topics that you would like for us to discuss on the show, be sure to send an email to the email provided in the show notes, or click the Contact Us link and let us know what topic you would like us to help you with, and we'll be sure to add it to our schedule. If you would like for Frank and his team to look at your digital marketing presence and give you a free evaluation, simply click the Request a Free Consultation link in the show notes to get a hold of them. That being said, until our next episode, make it a successful digital marketing day. Peace out.